They say every marriage holds secrets, but Lillian Westfield never imagined hers would nearly destroy her, especially while carrying her first child. Married to billionaire investor Christian Westfield, she believed her love story resembled a fairy tale: lavish galas, private jets, a mansion overlooking Central Park. But beneath the glittering surface brewed a betrayal so brazen it arrived with a financial invoice. The audacity. It wasn't from her husband. A mysterious woman sent Lillian a bill for services provided itemized with shocking demands. Stunned and pregnant, Lillian refused to be a victim. Instead, she crafted divorce terms so powerful they rocked New York's elite to its core. Lillian Westfield first met Christian Westfield at an auction for the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The year was 2015. The moment she spotted his dark, tailored suit and confident stride, she felt a jolt, a mixture of caution and attraction. She had grown up hearing about powerful men from her father, a former advisor at Goldman Sachs, who used to remind her that wealth can be as ruthless as it is glamorous. Yet Christian's charm disarmed her. He didn't just seem wealthy. He seemed genuinely passionate about the arts, about philanthropy, about living a life of meaning. At first glance, their life together looked plucked from a storybook. They traveled to Europe every summer, explored hidden architectural gems, and built a philanthropic foundation aimed at supporting children's education in underdeveloped regions. Lillian, an accomplished interior designer, had her own thriving business, establishing herself as the go-to decorator for boutique hotels in Manhattan. As a power couple, they often shared front-page features in lifestyle magazines. Their townhouse near Central Park boasted a marble foyer, stained glass skylight, and an elevator that glided through 5 floors of meticulously designed spaces. They hosted charity balls complete with celebrity guest lists that included people like philanthropist Bill Gates and actress Emma Watson, raising millions for causes dear to them. The public saw them as unstoppable, the epitome of a modern altruistic duo, beautiful, brilliant, and generous. Behind the scenes, though, it wasn't all gleam. The seeds of resentment had begun to sprout the moment Christian's hedge fund soared to new heights. As his business empire expanded, so did his ego. Meetings late into the night, lavish parties with potential investors, and whispered phone calls started to erode the closeness they once cherished. Lillian sensed shifts in Christian's behavior, unexplained getaways, dinner cancellations, fleeting messages on his phone that he'd quickly hide. But Lillian believed in second chances in conversation over confrontation. She also believed that life was cyclical. Times of closeness and distance came in waves. Unaware that a storm of betrayal was brewing just beyond her horizon, Lillian tried to keep her trust intact, focusing on her interior design projects and the exciting news that she was finally pregnant. Lillian grew up in a suburban New Jersey neighborhood, her father Richard O'Donnell serving as a financial consultant for Morgan Stanley. From an early age, she absorbed the language of high finance. Her father would bring home annual reports from clients like Warren Buffett and talk about the power of compound interest. It was also at the dinner table where she first learned about the pitfalls of greed and the price one pays when ambition becomes obsession. By the time she met Christian Westfield at that Met Gala auction, Lillian was already a well-regarded interior designer. She had turned a modest inheritance from her grandmother into a small fortune by flipping undervalued apartments in emerging neighborhoods. Her well-earned confidence and thorough financial knowledge ensured she was never overshadowed by wealthy suitors. Christian's background, meanwhile, was more silver-spooned. Born into old money aristocracy in Boston, he attended the most prestigious prep schools before heading to Harvard. Yet what set him apart, at least in the beginning, was his ability to empathize. He did not fit the cliché of a spoiled trust fund brat. As Lillian got to know Christian, she found a man who spoke passionately about social responsibility and climate change. He created a hedge fund that, according to him, prioritized ethical investments in renewable energy and technology aimed at improving society. The early days of their courtship were magical. They explored the Met Museum hand in hand, discussing art from the Impressionist era, then grabbed late-night pizza in Queens to keep it real, as Christian liked to say. Sundays were reserved for volunteer work at a soup kitchen, an activity Christian insisted they do to stay connected to the community. When Christian proposed a year later, it was on the steps of the Lincoln Center, following a performance of Swan Lake. The ring was a vintage emerald-cut diamond, a family heirloom passed down from his grandmother. Lillian felt overwhelmed by love and the sense of destiny. "We'll do incredible things together," Christian whispered into her ear. She believed him wholeheartedly. During these early years, Lillian never doubted his sincerity. If Christian needed more hours at the office, she assumed it was for the hedge fund's philanthropic goals. If he was secretive at times, she chalked it up to the demands of client confidentiality. How could she have known that beneath the facade of social consciousness and genuine heart, the seeds of infidelity would eventually take root? Running her own interior design firm had not been easy. Lillian's first big break came when she was approached to redesign the interior of a boutique hotel in Soho. She spent months curating artisanal light fixtures, sourcing reclaimed wood for accent walls, and designing custom furniture that seamlessly blended comfort with minimalist aesthetics. The project earned her a feature in Architectural Digest, catapulting her into Manhattan's elite design circle. Lillian soon expanded her portfolio, taking on high-profile clients. She balanced artistic vision with commercial viability, her skill lying in the ability to interpret her clients' personalities into living spaces. Rich colors and subtle textures became her signature. She believed that a home should tell a story about the people who lived there, one of warmth, openness, and the life experiences they cherished. This philosophy extended into her personal life. Lillian was a giver, always placing others first. She volunteered at local shelters, helped new designers find footing in a competitive industry, and offered internships to promising students from underprivileged backgrounds. She possessed a quiet resilience, never one to broadcast her struggles or triumphs. Instead, she let the results speak for themselves. When she discovered she was pregnant, Lillian's heart brimmed with joy. She envisioned a child who would inherit both her creativity and Christian's passion for social good. She began planning a nursery in soft grays and buttery yellows, set to be the coziest space in their enormous townhouse. But amid her excitement, she noticed the first ripples of tension with Christian. He seemed distracted, his phone always buzzing with calls from work. Occasionally, she would overhear bits of hushed conversations that ended abruptly once she entered the room. Still, she clung to hope. Love, after all, had guided them this far, and she believed people could weather storms if they communicated openly. Little did she know, she was about to receive a wake-up call, a private invoice in the mail, a brazen challenge to her place in Christian's life, and a demand that would shatter her illusions of security. The Westfield Fund. Christian's brainchild was initially small. He invested mostly in tech startups that promised environmental solutions, solar energy, wind turbines, and eco-friendly manufacturing. His success stories included early investments in Tesla and Beyond Meat, which propelled the fund into the spotlight as an example of how ethical investments could also be lucrative. As the fund grew, Christian found himself rubbing shoulders with New York's most prominent financiers. He attended exclusive gatherings at the St. Regis Hotel and private dinners in penthouse suites overlooking the Hudson River. Clients flocked to him, eager to be associated with a fund that claimed to do good for the planet while multiplying returns. Those who studied Christian's ascent closely noticed how everything seemed to accelerate after a lavish weekend in the Hamptons, hosted by none other than Robert Crown, the reclusive oil magnate turned philanthropist. Rumors circulated about who Christian rubbed elbows with that weekend executives from Morgan Stanley. A few tech geniuses and some foreign dignitaries known to hold massive generational wealth. Some friends teased Christian that he was transforming from a philanthropic dreamer into a cutthroat tycoon. He laughed it off, but something undeniably shifted in him. He started wearing bespoke suits from Savile Row, arrived at charity galas in a chauffeur-driven Bentley, and increasingly prized the image of success. It was as though he believed the appearance of virtue was as important, if not more so, than actual virtue. Lillian noticed these changes. In the past, Christian had spoken passionately about supporting impoverished villages in Africa. Now he was too busy managing new deals to attend the foundation meetings. He insisted that a thriving hedge fund would allow them to give more. "We're playing the long game," he'd say, with a charming smile. But after each new infusion of capital, Christian seemed more restless. Phone calls lingered late into the night, often behind closed doors. Lillian could sense an invisible wall erecting between them. When she tried to get his attention mentioning new designs, philanthropic initiatives, even her doctor's appointments, his replies were absent-minded and perfunctory. Despite her growing concerns, she hoped it was a phase. Many men, she reasoned, became workaholics to secure a future for their families. And with her pregnancy, perhaps Christian felt added pressure to expand their wealth. But those suspicions about him, having secrets, whatever they were, gnawed at her, a persistent whisper in the back of her mind that refused to be silenced. A few months into her pregnancy, Lillian started noticing anomalies that went beyond mere busyness. On Christian's nights out, supposedly spent with venture capitalists, he would come home with a faint trace of perfume floral notes she had never owned. When Lillian asked about it, he laughed it off. "You know how parties are," he said. "People hug your suit, picks up 1,000 cents. Lillian tried to brush it aside, but more clues surfaced: phone calls at odd hours that Christian would abruptly dismiss as wrong numbers. Suspicious credit card charges at a spa in Midtown on nights he claimed to be at the office, plus the occasional text message from unfamiliar names, women she had never heard of. Christian's excuses stacked up. The tension seeped into every corner of their relationship. Their once lively breakfast chats turned into stiff, polite conversations about schedules and surface matters. No deeper connection, no spontaneous laughter. At times, Christian looked at her belly as though it was both a blessing and a burden. One evening, as Lillian worked late on a new design proposal, she discovered Christian had left his iPad open on the kitchen counter. A message appeared, the preview reading, "Miss me already?" She felt a surge of panic. Before she could unlock the device, Christian swooped in, snatched it, and wore a guarded expression. "Work stuff," he muttered. Lillian's chest tightened. She felt her baby kick as if sensing her anxiety. That same night, she confronted Christian calmly. "If there's something you need to tell me, let's talk. We have a child on the way. We owe it to each other, to be honest," he responded with a dismissive wave. "I'm just stressed, Lillian. Could we not create more drama?" So she stepped back. For the moment, she chose to place her faith in her husband, her unborn child, and the memories of better times. She had no idea her entire world would soon come crashing down, delivered in the form of an elegant envelope addressed to her personally with a price tag attached that would make her blood boil. It happened on a Friday morning. Lillian was in the foyer reviewing design samples when the doorbell rang. Expecting a delivery of custom fabrics, she opened the door to see a courier holding a small stack of envelopes. Among them was a sleek black envelope sealed with a wax stamp, no return address. Something about it radiated importance and mystery. Lillian set the other mail aside and carefully opened the black envelope. Inside was a crisp piece of stationery that read, "Invoice to Mrs. Lillian Westfield. 4 evenings at the Eclipse Spa. 4,500. Shopping spree at Bergdorf. Goodman personal items. $12,000. Fine dining at Le Poème private booth. Chef's tasting. 2,500. Emotional labor and time. As discussed, $50,000. Total $69,000. At the bottom, scrawled in a careful looping handwriting, was a brief note. Please settle this bill promptly. These luxuries were enjoyed at your husband's request. Tiffany Monroe. For a moment, Lillian stood frozen, unable to comprehend the audacity. A mistress, a woman openly acknowledging her affair with Christian, was invoicing her rage, humiliation, and heartbreak collided in a single, dizzying wave. She dropped the envelope, sank into a chair, and tried to steady her breathing. Her baby fluttered within her, an unsettling reminder of the stakes. Tiffany Monroe. The name was unfamiliar, but Lillian suspected it was the same person behind those suspicious messages on Christian's iPad. How had things escalated to a point where the woman felt confident enough to demand money directly from the wife Lillian spent the afternoon in a spiral of disbelief and despair? She pressed the invoice against the kitchen table, half tempted to rip it to shreds. Instead, she tried calling Christian. Straight to voicemail. She texted him short and direct. "We need to talk ASAP." Hours passed without a response. By sundown, humiliation gave way to fury. How dare Tiffany treat her like a business partner who simply owed her a cut of Christian's extravagances? How dare Christian remain silent? Lillian began drafting a plan in her head, one that would safeguard her unborn child and ensure that she would never again be at the mercy of anyone's betrayal. The mistress wanted a bill settled. Lillian would respond with something far more drastic: divorce terms that no one in their right mind would dare dismiss. Christian finally walked through the door at around 10 that night, reeking of cologne and exhaustion. Lillian waited in the living room, the black envelope perched ominously on the coffee table. The moment he saw it, his face paled. He tried to mask his panic behind a forced smile, but Lillian's glare told him that no charade would work this time. She held up the invoice. "Want to explain this?" Her voice was low, almost calm, which unnerved Christian more than any outburst would. He stammered, "It's not what you think." But the words rang hollow in the silent room. Christian Lillian said, her voice quivering just enough to betray the emotional storm within. "I've tolerated late nights, suspicious phone calls, and secrets. But now this woman, Tiffany Monroe, has crossed a line. She sent me a bill for being your mistress. That's beyond humiliation. That's cruelty." Christian sank into an armchair. For a moment, he covered his face with his hands. When he finally looked up, Lillian saw a glimpse of guilt, overshadowed by desperation. Tiffany. She was an investor contact. One thing led to another. It was a mistake. Lillian held up a hand. "Stop." I don't need every sordid detail. She took a trembling breath. What I need is respect, honesty, and space to think. He tried to move closer to take her hand, but she pulled away. Lillian, I love you. I just don't, she said sharply. No more empty words. She pressed a protective hand against her belly. I have a child to consider, a future that cannot be tied to your lies and your wandering impulses. Christian tried to protest, but Lillian's steely resolve shone in her eyes. She told him she would be meeting with her attorney and that she expected his cooperation in a formal separation, if not a complete divorce. He pleaded, offered to see a marriage counselor, anything to keep this from exploding into public scandal. But Lillian's mind was already made up. She was no longer the naive, hopeful wife who believed everything could be mended with forgiveness. This betrayal, complete with a humiliating invoice, was a line in the sand, and she intended to make Christian and his mistress regret every cent of that $69,000. As dawn broke, Lillian found herself in a dilemma. She didn't want to face this alone, yet she hated the idea of revealing Christian's betrayal to friends or family. It felt too raw, too shameful. But she needed guidance, and so with a heavy heart, she called the one person who would stand by her unconditionally, her old college friend, Rebecca Becky Sandoval. Becky was a lawyer specializing in family law, with a stint at the prestigious firm Morgan & Ledbetter. They had remained close since dorm life at Parsons School of Design, bonding over late-night pizza and endless chatter about personal dreams. Becky had always admired Lillian's warmth and creativity, just as Lillian admired Becky's fierce intellect and unwavering loyalty. When Lillian arrived at Becky's Upper West Side apartment, she clutched the incriminating invoice like a damning piece of evidence. Becky's eyes widened as she read the details, her face flushing with indignation. What kind of sociopath demands money from a pregnant wife for entertaining her husband? Becky asked, outraged. Lillian sighed, tears brimming. This is what my life has become. I feel humiliated and lost. I don't want to remain married to him if this is how he treats me. But I also need to protect myself and especially the baby. Becky set aside her coffee mug. I'll help you navigate this. We'll make sure you get what you deserve. Christian is wealthy, and you've invested years of emotional labor and your own funds into this marriage. You should be compensated, especially with a child on the way. Relief flooded Lillian. I've been so afraid. Christian's influence is enormous. The press loves him. I don't want to be seen as some gold digger or a scorned woman looking for revenge. Becky's gaze hardened. Don't you dare blame yourself. If he wants to flaunt his mistress's bills, we'll see how he handles real legal action. Let's prepare for the worst. It might get ugly, but you won't face it alone. With that conversation, Lillian felt a spark of hope. She had an ally, someone who believed in her worth and had the legal chops to fight for it. The next move was to draft a set of divorce terms, so formidable that Tiffany's petty invoice would look like spare change in comparison. Days passed as Becky and Lillian meticulously prepared the divorce papers. They combed through Christian's assets, from his shares in ecotech companies to real estate holdings in Manhattan, London, and even a small vineyard in Napa Valley. It was a painstaking process, but each detail added another brick to Lillian's protective wall. During this time, Christian vacillated between begging forgiveness and lashing out. He bombarded Lillian with frantic calls, alternately promising to end things with Tiffany and accusing Lillian of overreacting. Her silence only fueled his desperation. But the mistress, Tiffany Monroe, had other plans. She was about to make her move, determined to ensure she wasn't dismissed as a fling. One morning, Lillian awoke to a flurry of missed calls from unknown numbers. Confused, she checked her voicemail. "Mrs. Westfield, we're reporters from the Daily Chronicle. We'd love a comment on the rumor that your husband might be separating from you for Ms. Munro." Her heart raced as she realized Tiffany had leaked the affair to the press. Within hours, paparazzi swarmed her townhouse, snapping photos of Lillian with her baby bump, shouting questions about the woman who sent you a bill. Panicked Lillian called Becky, who advised her to stay indoors and not respond publicly. "Any statement now could be twisted," Becky cautioned. "Let's finalize the divorce terms first." But Tiffany wasn't done. She posted cryptic photos on social media, hinting at a luxurious lifestyle spa visits, helicopter rides, lavish dinners. In one particularly brazen post, she wore a diamond necklace that Lillian recognized as Christian's gift during their first anniversary trip to Paris. The caption read, "When he knows how to keep a woman happy." Lillian's fury threatened to consume her. This woman's audacity was unrelenting. She was not simply content with an affair. She craved publicity, as though flaunting her conquest of a billionaire husband was a twisted badge of honor. While Christian tried to contain the media fallout, Lillian focused on her unborn child. She felt the baby's kicks more frequently. Now a constant reminder that she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for a secure future for her little one, free from the toxic betrayal that had marred the family's foundations. The tension surged to a boiling point. If Tiffany thought she could manipulate the narrative and paint Lillian as a hapless victim, she had underestimated the strength and cunning of the woman she had so brazenly provoked. The phone refused to stop ringing. Journalists, bloggers, even former acquaintances looking for gossip. Everyone seemed ravenous for a scoop. Lillian leaned against her kitchen counter, trying to steady her breath. Christian had left frantic messages. "Don't do this, Lillian. We can weather the storm. I'll cut Tiffany out of my life." But a single glance at the black envelope pinned to her fridge reminded her why she couldn't stay silent any longer. She grabbed her keys and left the townhouse escorted by a private security guard Becky had arranged to keep paparazzi at bay. Her destination was the Morgan & Ledbetter law firm, Becky's office, where she would finalize her decision to file for divorce. Once inside Becky's glass-walled conference room, she was greeted by towering stacks of documents. Lillian's chest tightened at the sight. "This is it, then, the official separation," she said. Softly, Becky placed a reassuring hand on Lillian's shoulder. "I know it's overwhelming, but we've made sure every detail is covered: spousal support, child support, property division, you name it." Lillian nodded, flipping through the pages. Her eyes landed on the settlement figure, an amount so staggering it seemed surreal. But as Becky reminded her, Christian's personal fortune had soared into the billions. The sum was only a fraction of his empire, yet more than enough to ensure a comfortable life for Lillian and the baby. "Are you sure you're ready for the media circus this might spark?" Becky asked, her voice gentle. "Divorce with these stakes is bound to attract even more attention." Lillian inhaled deeply, recalling the humiliating bill Tiffany had sent. She imagined the quiet life she wanted for her child, free from secrets and humiliations. "I'm ready," she said, signing the necessary forms. With that pen stroke, she severed the bonds that had once been the cornerstone of her love story. No matter the chaos to come, she resolved that her child would never look at her with the sorrow of a mother too fearful to stand up for herself. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the moment she walked out of that office, she would be Lillian Westfield, soon-to-be ex-wife of a billionaire and a woman determined to forge a new beginning. The documents lay neatly stacked on Becky's conference room table, a quiet storm bound in crisp legal formatting. Lillian stared at the title page. Draft Westfield versus Westfield Dissolution of Marriage Agreement, and felt her chest tighten with a rush of conflicting emotions. This was no longer about heartbreak. This was about reclaiming her power, securing her child's future, and sending a message to a man who had treated her love as expendable. Becky slid the top page toward her. It's all here. Everything we discussed. I've made sure no one can accuse you of being vindictive. This is clean, comprehensive, and bulletproof. Together they reviewed the details one more time. The settlement began with the foundation generous spousal maintenance tied to a fixed percentage of Christian's annual earnings, calculated to grow proportionally with the success of the Westfield Fund. Given his billions in holdings and assets, it would ensure Lillian lived not just comfortably, but independently. Child support came next. A secure figure that would be reviewed annually with adjustments for inflation healthcare costs and private education from kindergarten to Ivy League. Becky had even included contingencies, full coverage for a nanny, prenatal and postnatal care, and a clause that Christian would be legally responsible for any emergency medical expenses for both mother and child, no matter the cost. Then came the trust fund. Your child, Becky said softly, will have full access to a multi-million-dollar trust by age 25. You'll manage it as guardian until then. No interference. Lillian nodded, feeling the protective mother in her rising. He won't grow up wondering if he's worthy. Real estate was next. Lillian would retain full ownership of the Boston estate, historic, sprawling and quietly luxurious. It wasn't just property. It was legacy, and she would make sure it became a haven of stability for her child. The Central Park townhouse, their former marital home, would be liquidated. The proceeds would be split, but only after Lillian received a payout for the renovations and interior design work she had done herself. Her own touch, her artistry finally acknowledged as valuable. But perhaps the most telling section of the settlement came in the form of two unusual clauses. The first, profit sharing in the Westfield Fund. Though Christian had always been its public face, Lillian had helped shape its philanthropic identity. Her introductions, her public speaking, her networking in philanthropic circles had brought in over a dozen major investors. Becky argued and documented those contributions in detail. Every man builds his empire on the back of someone, Becky said. And you were the one holding him up. Now the world will know it. The second clause was symbolic and cathartic. It was labeled compensatory damages for emotional distress and public humiliation. A direct response to the infamous Mistress invoice Tiffany had so boldly sent. Becky tapped the section. $500,000. It won't undo what she did. But it's a message? Lillian didn't smile, but her eyes hardened with clarity. She sent me a bill, she murmured. So I'm sending her the invoice she wasn't expecting. At the end of the document, a confidentiality agreement sealed the terms. If Christian or Tiffany leaked any personal details or attempted to slander Lillian's name in the press, the financial penalties would be swift and severe. It was, as Becky put it, the legal equivalent of a velvet hammer. Lillian set down the pen and looked at Becky. Do you think he'll sign? Becky leaned back. He'll fume. He'll curse. But he'll sign. If he doesn't, we take it to court, and Tiffany's antics become courtroom evidence. Christian knows exactly how much he stands to lose. Lillian breathed deeply, her hand resting on her belly. This isn't about revenge. It's about respect. For myself, for my child. Becky nodded. Exactly. Without another word, Lillian picked up the pen and signed her name. It was elegant, it was final, and it was worth every dollar. She had entered the fight with her dignity in tatters. Now she was walking out with her name, her future, and $1 million reminder that some women don't break. They build. Christian Westfield stared at the divorce settlement as if it were written in fire. Every clause, every figure, every line item was a monument to the reality he had so carefully tried to avoid. Lillian wasn't bluffing. She wasn't broken. She had turned every ounce of betrayal into strategy, and he was holding the evidence of it in his trembling hands. His office at the Westfield Fund, once a sanctuary of ego and ambition, now felt like a gilded cage. The sunlight filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows offered no comfort. The city below, which once bowed to his every whim, now looked indifferent. He grabbed his phone and dialed. Lillian answered on the third ring. Her voice was cool, steady. "You've seen the papers, I assume." "You're out of your mind," Christian snapped. "These demands are insane. Half the Boston estate, a profit share in my hedge fund. You didn't build any of that." "I built your brand," Lillian replied calmly. "I gave speeches, hosted events, introduced you to investors who believed in our shared vision. And I carried your child while your mistress was out shopping with your black card." Christian fell silent. She continued, voice low but firm. "I'm done arguing. This is about what I'm owed. What our child is owed." He tried to pivot. "I never meant for it to go this far. Tiffany was a mistake. I'll make it right. I'll end it." "You ended it the moment you let her send me a bill," she said. "Now I'm just collecting what's due." He clenched his jaw. "If this goes public, it'll destroy me." "Then sign quietly," she answered. "Or drag it out and let the world watch." The call ended. Christian hurled the phone across the room. It hit the glass wall with a sharp crack, but didn't shatter just like Lillian. She didn't break. She simply became sharper. He sat back down and ran a hand through his hair. In his mind, she had always been the quiet one. The soft-spoken designer who stood by his side smiled for the cameras and forgave easily. He never expected her to outmaneuver him. He never imagined she would be the one to bring him to his knees. But now, for the first time in his life, Christian Westfield had lost. Not in business, not on paper, but where it mattered most. And Lillian. She had just begun to win. The headlines didn't slow down. If anything, Tiffany Monroe's outrageous behavior at the law firm had poured gasoline on an already raging fire. The press had a field day. Rumors swirled across Manhattan's elite social circuits, mixing fact and fabrication into a sensational cocktail of betrayal scandal and high society drama. Westfield showdown, Mistress crashes negotiations. The $69,000 invoice that triggered a $1 million divorce. Pregnant wife shuts down. Mistress mid-tantrum. Bravo. Lillian didn't bother reading most of it. She stayed focused. The settlement was still pending, and Christian's legal team, led by the notoriously aggressive Henry Steinberg, had not backed down. If anything, they were doubling down, working to undermine her role in Christian's empire, attacking her emotional distress claims, and trying to portray her as a woman using pregnancy to secure wealth. It was a ruthless strategy. But Becky had anticipated every move. While Steinberg launched his offensive, Becky went on the defensive and then the offensive of her own. Through a calculated anonymous leak to a reputable gossip columnist, a key piece of the narrative hit the media like lightning, the original invoice Tiffany had sent to Lillian. Public opinion, which had been somewhat divided, swung sharply in Lillian's favor. The image of a pregnant woman receiving a demand for spa bills and emotional labor from her husband's mistress sent shockwaves through society. Tiffany Monroe quickly became a cautionary tale, lampooned online, mocked on talk shows, and widely seen as a greedy opportunist who had overplayed her hand. She actually sent a bill, one late-night host joked. Was there a line item for betrayal with interest? The media, once circling Lillian like vultures, now began referring to her with a new moniker, the Graceful Storm. But it wasn't just a PR win. Behind the scenes, the damage to Christian's carefully curated public image was substantial. The Westfield Fund, which prided itself on socially responsible investing, was suddenly the subject of investor scrutiny. Several high-profile clients privately reached out to Christian's partners with concerns. Rumors began to surface that certain board members were considering asking him to step down as CEO temporarily, if not permanently. And Christian felt it. For the first time in his professional life, he wasn't in control. In private emails and messages, he vacillated between fury and panic. He texted Lillian several times a day, attempting to spin everything. "Let's talk. I didn't expect her to do this. I never meant for you to get dragged into this. I still love you." Lillian never replied. The silence was strategic and empowering. Instead, she met with Becky daily to refine the settlement, adjusting child support to scale with inflation, inserting clauses that would secure access to trust funds for the child, and demanding formal recognition of her contributions to the fund's public image. Every speech you gave Becky reminded her, every gala you hosted, every introduction you made that has value. Don't let them erase that. Christian's team countered. They attempted to settle under the table, offering a smaller figure in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement. They framed it as a dignified solution. Lillian saw it for what it was, a final attempt to hush the truth. Her answer was firm. No deal without justice. While her name was being tossed around dinner parties and editorial columns, Lillian stayed grounded. She focused on her health, her baby's well-being, and her own mental clarity. Prenatal yoga calls with her mother and long walks in Riverside Park became her sacred rituals. She journaled often, not about pain, but about resilience. And when news broke that Tiffany Monroe had fled the city, her social media gone dark, her brand in tatters, Lillian didn't celebrate. She simply felt done. Christian's world was imploding. His empire strained under public pressure. His charm, once his strongest weapon, had lost its power. And now, cornered on all sides, he agreed to a final meeting. The room was the same one where Tiffany had once thrown a tantrum. But this time, Lillian was calm, commanding, and utterly unmoved. On one side, Christian and his legal team, their expressions guarded. On the other, Lillian, Becky, and the full weight of truth on their side. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about legacy. And Lillian had no intention of walking away with anything less than everything she and her child deserved. Lillian had expected the legal negotiations to be tense. She had not expected Tiffany Monroe to storm through the doors of the law firm in 5-inch stilettos, a designer handbag clutched in one manicured hand and a folded legal document in the other, like it was a weapon. It was midday, and the conference room was quiet. On one side sat Lillian Becky and a composed junior associate. On the other, Christian and his lawyer, Henry Steinberg, who had been carefully reviewing the final draft of the divorce settlement. That delicate calm shattered when the door burst open. "You think you can just erase me?" Tiffany's voice sliced through the air, shrill and furious. Everyone turned. "Tiffany, this is a private." Steinberg began rising from his seat. She ignored him and marched straight to Lillian, her heels clicking with sharp finality. "Mrs. Westfield," she sneered, "you have no idea what's coming. Christian made promises. I was there for him when he needed someone. I deserve to be compensated." Lillian didn't flinch. She sat tall, her baby bump visible beneath her cream-knit dress, her face an unreadable mask of calm. "Compensated?" Lillian asked softly, as though tasting the word. "Yes," Tiffany snapped, waving the letter in her hand. "I have a statement from my lawyer. I've been threatened, silenced, and now you want to walk away with everything? Like I was never part of it." Christian rose, then his expression a mix of panic and disbelief. "Tiffany, stop. We've already talked about this." "You weren't supposed to—" "Oh, I'm done waiting," she snapped at him, turning back to Lillian. "I won't be erased. I was with him for months. While you were playing perfect wife, I was the one keeping him sane. You think you're the victim? Please. This world doesn't reward women who play it safe. It rewards women who fight." Becky stood now, placing herself subtly between Lillian and the raging woman. "You're trespassing Ms. Monroe. And from what I can tell, you've just attempted to issue a demand under threat on record." Tiffany rolled her eyes. "Oh, spare me the lawyer routine. You're just mad I spoke first." Lillian slowly stood. Her calm was unnerving. She walked past Becky, past Christian, until she stood directly in front of Tiffany, close enough to see the sweat beading beneath the woman's flawless foundation. "You sent me a bill," Lillian said, voice steady. "For massages, for dinners, for time. You dared to put a price on betrayal and deliver it to the woman carrying his child." Tiffany's lips parted, but no words came. Lillian took a small breath. "Let me make something very clear. You are not owed a cent. You were a willing participant in someone else's marriage. And if Christian promised you something, take it up with him. But you will never again speak to me. Never send me anything. Never show up in my space." Becky chimed in. "If you do, Ms. Monroe will file for harassment and a restraining order." Christian looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "Tiffany, leave." Tiffany glared at him. "You're a coward." He didn't argue. Lillian continued, her voice now cool and clear. "You came here today to prove something. But all you did was confirm what I already knew. You're not a threat. You're noise. And I no longer listen to noise." Tiffany's confidence cracked. She turned to Christian one last time. "Don't think this is over." Then she stormed out, the echo of her heels fading down the hallway. For a long moment, the room was still. Then Becky let out a slow exhale. "Well, that saves us a subpoena." Lillian sat back down and glanced at Christian. He couldn't meet her eyes. The mistress had shown her cards and folded. Lillian, meanwhile, had just proven to everyone in that room that there was only one woman worthy of the Westfield name, and she had no intention of giving it up quietly. The hospital room was unnervingly quiet. Machines beeped, steadily monitoring Lillian and the baby as nurses came and went in soft-soled shoes. Christian sat in the corner watching her sleep. He looked smaller now, his usual commanding presence wilted under guilt and exhaustion. The bags under his eyes weren't from stress alone, they were from shame. Earlier that morning, a new test had revealed complications with Lillian's pregnancy. Though the baby's vitals were stable, doctors warned of heightened risk. Bed rest is crucial, the specialist had said firmly, and minimal emotional stress. You're both strong, but your body needs protection now more than ever. Lillian had nodded, her lips pressed tightly together. She wasn't scared of pain. She had lived with worse. But the possibility of losing her child because of Christian's betrayal, that thought was unbearable. Christian had lingered at her bedside all day, offering water-fluffing pillows, whispering apologies. Lillian didn't trust any of it. Still, she allowed him to stay, not out of forgiveness, but because she wanted answers. As dusk fell, and the baby's heartbeat echoed gently in the background, she finally asked why her. Christian hesitated. She turned her head slowly to face him. No more deflections. No more PR statements. I deserve to know. He looked away for a long moment, then took a slow breath. It wasn't love, he began. Voice brittle. It wasn't even lust at first. It was leverage. Lillian's brow furrowed. Christian swallowed hard. Tiffany. She was connected to a group of potential investors. Old money, European banking families. One of them wanted favors, introductions, visibility. Tiffany offered access. She played her role, I played mine. You used her. To close deals? Lillian asked, horrified. He nodded miserably. At first, yes. Then she got comfortable. She wanted more. I didn't stop it. I thought I could control it, contain it. Lillian's hand trembled slightly as she touched her belly. And me. What was I? A prop for your public image? No, he said quickly, standing. Never. You were the only real thing in my life. I know that now. But you didn't know it then, she replied flatly. Not when you let your mistress invoice me. Not when you lied. Not when you put our child at risk. He couldn't meet her eyes. I thought I married a man with vision, she said, softly, tears welling but not falling. Instead, I married someone who sold his soul for quarterly gains. Christian moved closer. Lillian, I'm so sorry. I'll spend the rest of my life making this right. She looked at him, weary but unwavering. You can't undo this, but you can stay out of my way while I protect what you nearly destroyed. That night, as Christian left the room, shoulders slumped under the weight of his own undoing, Lillian reached for the small ultrasound photo taped beside her bed. She ran her fingers over the black and white blur of her baby's tiny face. I'll do better, she whispered to her unborn child. For both of us. The betrayal was complete, but so was her resolve. The week Lillian spent in the hospital passed in a haze of fluorescent lights, whispered check-ins, and quiet determination. Her condition had stabilized, the baby was strong, and doctors were optimistic. But emotionally, Lillian was still reeling, not from fear of the future, but from finally accepting the irrevocable truth her marriage to Christian was over. Christian visited often. He brought flowers, asked about the baby, and hovered like a man trying to rewind a clock already broken. But Lillian no longer softened at his gestures. She spoke to him kindly but distantly, the tone of a woman who had drawn a line and refused to cross it again. "You made your choices," she told him during one of his visits. "Now I'm making mine." While Lillian recovered, Becky worked tirelessly behind the scenes. The updated divorce terms were not just strategic, they were airtight. Every clause protected Lillian's physical health, emotional well-being, and financial future. Any further medical care or complications from the pregnancy would be covered in full. The child support agreement wasn't just generous. It was indexed to Christian's investment growth and protected from fluctuation. A separate education fund would guarantee the child access to top institutions, no matter what scandals might affect the Westfield name in the years ahead. Christian's legal team reviewed the documents in tense silence. They knew they had no leverage left. His mistress had imploded their case with one reckless outburst. His reputation, though salvaged publicly with a carefully crafted press release, was in tatters behind closed doors. Investors were uneasy. Board members had whispered about voting him out. And Lillian, graceful as ever, had won without ever stepping into the mud. With quiet reluctance, Christian signed. No outburst, no final attempt at persuasion. Just the scratch of pen on paper, the official end of the marriage he had ruined. The following afternoon, Lillian was released from the hospital. Her steps were slow, cautious, but every movement radiated purpose. Paparazzi waited outside the private entrance. She walked past them calmly, sunglasses on a protective hand resting on her baby bump. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke louder than any headline ever could. A car arranged by Becky whisked her away, not to the townhouse she once shared with Christian, but to a sleek, sunlit condo in Tribeca one Lillian had secured under her own name. The space was modern and warm, designed by one of her former protégés and gifted to her as a gesture of solidarity. As she stepped inside, something in her exhaled. Not relief, not triumph. Freedom. There were still boxes to unpack, nursery plans to finalize, and 1,000 small tasks to prepare for motherhood. But for the first time in months, maybe even years, she felt weightless. Her name was hers again, her space, her future. In the weeks that followed, the media cycle shifted. Tiffany Monroe, once smug and calculating, faded from the spotlight. Her attempt to provoke Lillian into public humiliation had backfired spectacularly. After her tantrum at the law firm and failed attempt at extortion, no outlet wanted to hear her side. She had become a punchline, not a headline. Christian maintained a dignified silence, releasing a statement that read, "After careful reflection, Ms. Westfield and I have decided to part ways amicably. I remain committed to supporting her and our child with the utmost respect and privacy." But Lillian didn't need his words. She had everything she needed: her own business, her child, and a renewed sense of who she was. She resumed design work, slowly starting with remote consultations and vision boards. Her first client post-settlement was a new wellness retreat in upstate New York. The space, she decided, would be built on themes of renewal, balance, and quiet strength. In a way, it mirrored her own rebirth. Her friends returned, some with apologies for not seeing the cracks, sooner others simply offering support without explanation. Lillian welcomed them with open arms. She had no energy for bitterness, only forward momentum. In late spring, she stood in the condo's living room, a glass of herbal tea in hand, sunlight streaming across the hardwood floor. Her baby kicked softly beneath her dress, a small reminder of all she had fought for. She smiled not at the world, not at a camera, but at herself. She had not only survived betrayal, she had transformed it. The mistress had sent her a bill. But Lillian, she sent back divorce terms worth millions, and in the process she secured something even more valuable: peace. Lillian's journey reminds us that betrayal, no matter how deep, can be a powerful catalyst for rediscovering our own worth. She turned a humiliating demand from her husband's mistress into an opportunity to secure the future for herself and her child. In doing so, she proved that resilience and self-respect can outweigh even the grandest illusions of wealth and status. From the outside, Jonathan Cole's life gleamed like a storybook fairy tale. A self-made millionaire in the heart of Manhattan, he graced glossy magazine covers, mingled with world leaders, and never missed a chance to flaunt his success. Yet behind the tall glass windows of his penthouse, tensions brewed. A secret text here, a guarded phone call there, and rumors whispered of a tangled affair that threatened to explode. Meanwhile, Alicia Cole, his pregnant wife, began to sense the cracks in her gilded cage. No one, least of all Jonathan, suspected how quickly a single online leak would unravel his carefully manicured world, ending his career in the span of one unforgettable night. Jonathan Cole's story was the stuff of modern legend. Born to middle-class parents in suburban New Jersey, he had clawed his way to a scholarship at Harvard Business School. There he'd rubbed shoulders with future magnates, forging alliances that would later propel him to the top of the finance world. By age 32, Jonathan had founded Cole Capital Ventures, a private equity firm that specialized in distressed real estate assets, buying low, selling high, and weaving magic in between. His good looks and suave charm made him a darling of the business press. Forbes ran a feature titled Young Titan, Jonathan Cole's meteoric rise, capturing him in a tailored navy suit against the panoramic backdrop of New York City. In the interview, he praised mentors such as Warren Buffett for teaching him patience and Bill Gates for demonstrating philanthropy on a global scale. The crowning moment, though, was his picture-shaking hands with Elon Musk after a speculative investment in aerospace startups. Jonathan glowed with the certainty that he was destined for greatness. It was at a fundraiser in Central Park that he first met Alicia Martinez. She was a non-profit consultant with a passion for arts education. Where Jonathan's approach to conversation was slick and polished, Alicia's was empathetic and earnest. He found her refusal to be dazzled by his reputation oddly refreshing. She was there to talk about underfunded public schools, not hedge funds or leveraged buyouts. By the end of that charity walk, Jonathan had her phone number, and she had a curious spark in her heart. In 2 short years, they were married. Alicia's parents, humble owners of a small bakery in Queens, couldn't believe their daughter was wedding a man so frequently mentioned in the Wall Street Journal. But to Alicia, Jonathan wasn't simply the millionaire. He was the person who showed up unannounced to volunteer at her community events, who wrote personal checks for after-school programs. Their wedding ceremony, held at a historic mansion overlooking the Hudson River, was a glamorous yet heartfelt affair. The tabloids brimmed with gushing coverage, Alicia radiant in lace, Jonathan dashing in a classic tuxedo, smiling as though they had discovered the secret to eternal happiness. At first, their union genuinely seemed magical. Jonathan declared that Alicia grounded him, tethered him to values he might have otherwise forgotten. She brought soul to his ambition. Life in the Cole penthouse sparkled with promise, lavish soirees for global dignitaries, altruistic ventures to build schools in underprivileged neighborhoods, and daily bursts of joy that only two people deeply in love could share. If only that bliss could have lasted. Life moved quickly in Jonathan's orbit. The success of Cole Capital Ventures brought new deals, new acquaintances, and inevitably new pressures. Over time, Alicia witnessed the subtle changes in her husband's routine. Invitations from the global elite poured in exclusive dinners with real estate mogul Mark Anderson, lunches at the Plaza with famed venture capitalist Lucy Goldstein, and hush-hush strategy sessions with foreign sovereign funds. While Alicia supported her husband's drive, she couldn't ignore the increasing cracks in his calendar or in his demeanor. He began coming home later, offering vague explanations about urgent meetings or unexpected negotiations. Alicia, ever understanding, reassured him that she respected his hustle. But then came the cancellations of their personal plans. A date to watch an off-Broadway show cancelled. A weekend getaway to the Hamptons postponed. Birthdays and family gatherings became second-tier priorities. The more she tried to reach him, the more she felt a certain emotional distance creeping in. Around the office, Jonathan was surrounded by loyalists and ladder climbers alike. One of them was David Lynn, his longtime friend from Harvard, and now partner at Cole Capital. David had witnessed Jonathan's evolution firsthand. He noticed subtle changes too: Jonathan's sharper edge during conference calls, the tension behind his charismatic smile during business pitches. Yet David trusted that a man as resourceful as Jonathan always had it under control. Among the staff at Cole Capital Ventures was also the bright and ambitious Veronica King. A recent Wharton MBA graduate, Veronica had made waves by closing a multi-million-dollar investment in green technology within her first year at the firm. Her intelligence and striking beauty made her a conversation piece at every corporate event. Jonathan lauded her as the future face of finance, praising her for deals that posted triple returns. He found in Veronica a reflection of his younger self, hungry, driven, and fearless. Still, none suspected that an alliance far different than business was about to form. At this point, Alicia had no idea who Veronica King truly was. She saw her name in passing on annual reports. Occasionally, Jonathan would mention Veronica's accomplishments, praising her for innovative thinking. Alicia would nod and smile, impressed by this rising star. In Alicia's mind, she was grateful Jonathan had formidable professionals like Veronica on his team. She never once suspected that the very power he admired in his protégé might be forging a dangerous temptation beneath their polished corporate veneer. As Alicia's pregnancy crept into her second trimester, she began noticing odd details. The first warning sign was a perfume scent she didn't recognize lingering on Jonathan's coat. She asked him about it casually, and he brushed it off, probably from a handshake at some networking event. Another red flag was how he protected his phone like a prized artifact, always face down, always locked with a new passcode. Late at night, she'd hear the faint buzz of messages, see the subtle glow of his screen as he typed back in the dark. Each time, she tried to rationalize away her concerns. This was the man she loved, who donated millions to build libraries in underserved communities, who cried at the birth announcement, who once surprised her on a random Tuesday with her favorite pastries from her parents' bakery. Infidelity seemed unimaginable. Yet Alicia's heart churned with a subtle, gnawing dread. Life in the Cole penthouse had become increasingly solitary. Although Jonathan had promised to limit business travel during her pregnancy, his schedule remained as frenetic as ever. Singapore, Dubai, Paris. He was always on the go, chasing new mergers or expansions. He rarely spent more than a couple of nights at home. When he did, he was restless, glued to emails or brainstorming calls. Alicia began to feel that the only presence she could truly count on was the baby she carried. Friends from Alicia's old neighborhood in Queens reached out with concern. They missed her visits the way she used to pop in for coffee and conversation. "He's just going through a busy phase," she'd reassure them. In a way, Alicia was trying to reassure herself too. Still, doubt grew every time she caught sight of that mysterious perfume or saw a new bruise-like shadow under her husband's eyes from sleepless nights. Then Alicia found something chilling, a hotel receipt tucked in Jonathan's suitcase from a high-end resort in Turks and Caicos. The date overlapped with a weekend he'd told her he was in Boston, closing a deal. She tried to confront him, but lost her nerve. Could she have misunderstood? Was it a courtesy booking for a client or staff? Her mind ran in circles, seeking a plausible explanation. Little did she know the truth was far more insidious. Veronica King was not the sort of woman who blended into the background. With ebony hair styled in a sleek bob, she carried herself with confident ease. By day, she dazzled boardrooms with crisp financial analyses, commanding respect from colleagues twice her age. By night, she appeared in social columns alongside Manhattan's elite, her emerald dress shimmering under paparazzi flashes. She was rumored to have grown up in modest circumstances, determined to break ceilings, no matter the cost. One evening, Alicia found herself accompanying Jonathan to a charity gala, hosted by the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Proceeds would benefit underfunded art programs in public schools, an event that aligned perfectly with Alicia's passion. Upon arriving, Alicia felt the old sparkle of excitement hobnobbing with notable figures like gallery owners, educators, and philanthropic entrepreneurs. A group of Jonathan's colleagues from Cole Capital Ventures greeted them, among whom was Veronica. This was their first real introduction. "Ah, the legend herself," Veronica said, with a radiant smile, extending her hand to Alicia. "Jonathan speaks so highly of you, and all the wonderful work you do with school kids." Alicia returned the greeting, struck by Veronica's grace. She was everything Alicia imagined a high-flying finance star, to be polished, assertive, exuding an air of subtle power. When Alicia mentioned her involvement in drafting new arts curricula, Veronica listened attentively, nodding as though she truly cared. The conversation was pleasant, even warm. Yet Alicia caught a flicker of something unspoken between Veronica and Jonathan, a shared glance that felt too intimate, too layered with private meaning. Throughout the gala, Alicia couldn't shake the sense that eyes were on them, as if the rest of the guests sensed an undercurrent. She told herself she was imagining it, that she was just hormonal and overthinking, but a tiny voice inside her whispered, "Veronica King is more important to Jonathan than you realize." By the evening's end, Alicia felt unsettled. Jonathan excused himself to take a call, just when Alicia was beginning to share her feelings about an educational campaign. Veronica also vanished into the throng of socialites. Alicia sipped her sparkling water in awkward solitude, noticing a faint swirl of that same unfamiliar perfume drifting through the air. After the gala, Alicia began piecing together subtle patterns. Jonathan had singled Veronica out in so many conversations, praising her as a strategic genius, marveling at her ability to close deals in weeks that took others months. In the past, Alicia had been proud whenever Jonathan mentored bright up-and-comers. Yet with Veronica, the tone of his praise sounded tinged with personal adoration. One morning, Alicia found herself with a free schedule and decided to surprise Jonathan at his office with homemade pastries, his favorite almond croissants from her parents' bakery. It was a gesture she used to do often, back when everything felt normal. Arriving unannounced, Alicia was greeted by the wide-eyed receptionist, who stumbled through a hello, as though not entirely sure how to handle her presence. She brushed it off and headed down the glass-walled corridor to Jonathan's corner office. Outside his door, Alicia froze. Through the partial opening, she heard lowered voices. Jonathan and Veronica seemed to be in the middle of a heated discussion, but not in an angry sense, more like an emotionally charged conversation. Alicia didn't want to eavesdrop, yet she couldn't will herself to move. Then she clearly heard Veronica say, "We'll figure this out, Jonathan. I'm not giving up on you." A brief silence followed, and then Jonathan's voice, softer. "I know. Just not here." Alicia's heart hammered in her chest. She quickly retraced her steps and waited by the reception area, forcing a casual expression when Veronica exited the office moments later. Veronica paused in surprise upon seeing Alicia with the pastry box. "Oh, hi. I didn't know you'd be stopping by." Her voice carried an undercurrent of tension, though her face remained impeccably calm. Alicia's fingers clenched around the box as she managed a tight smile. Their brief exchange ended with Veronica slipping away in a swirl of designer perfume. Alicia approached Jonathan's office next. He greeted her with mild surprise and a forced grin. "Almond croissants, wow," he said, accepting the box. His eyes flicked to the door, as if confirming Veronica was gone. Alicia asked if he was all right, and Jonathan dismissed it as office stress. The entire moment felt like a carefully choreographed dance, with unspoken tensions swirling around them. That night, Alicia hardly slept, twisting the memory of Veronica's words over and over in her mind. "I'm not giving up on you." She remembered how intimate they sounded, like a promise between lovers rather than colleagues. Uncertainty blossomed, overshadowing even the joys of her pregnancy. She told herself she needed proof before leaping to conclusions that might destroy her marriage. Still, the seeds of suspicion had taken root, and the soil of her heart felt unbearably cold. Despite mounting worries, Alicia maintained her public smile as she accompanied Jonathan to another high-profile event, the annual City of Tomorrow Gala. Headlined by luminaries in real estate, tech, and philanthropy, it was a can't-miss affair for anyone jockeying for influence. Jonathan was especially eager to network with Tony McAllister, a legendary investor rumored to be launching a multi-billion-dollar fund. Alicia planned to share her vision for an educational project that integrated cutting-edge technology into underfunded schools, hoping to drum up philanthropic support. The venue was lavish, a 5-star hotel ballroom overlooking Central Park. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and violin music mingled with the hum of high-stakes conversation. Alicia wore a flowing cobalt gown, tailored to accommodate her growing baby bump. She felt both regal and uneasy, noting the stares from various acquaintances. She wondered if she was imagining the undertones of gossip in their voices when they greeted her. About an hour into the gala, Veronica King swept in, wearing a sequined emerald dress that seemed to catch every flicker of light. She joined Jonathan, who stood near a champagne fountain, exchanging pleasantries with Tony McAllister. Veronica's arrival sparked a shift in the air. Jonathan's posture straightened, and there was a palpable current of electricity as they spoke. Alicia approached, heart thudding. She joined the circle just in time to hear Jonathan praising Veronica. She single-handedly brought in an Indonesian sovereign fund for our latest project. Imagine what she'll do next year. Veronica laughed softly, thanking him, while shooting a quick coded look in his direction. That fleeting glance felt like a secret confession. Tony McAllister then turned to Alicia, politely inquiring about her philanthropic interests. Seizing the opportunity, she shared her concept for bridging education gaps through advanced technology. Though Tony listened, Alicia sensed a general distraction in the group, as if her words were overshadowed by the silent drama swirling between Jonathan and Veronica. She pressed on regardless, determined to stand her ground. Partway through the evening, Alicia watched from across the ballroom as Jonathan and Veronica slipped out onto the balcony. Their silhouettes formed tense outlines in the moonlight. Alicia could almost feel the strain in their stances. When they returned, Jonathan was stone-faced, while Veronica looked tearful. The rest of the gala played out in a haze, Alicia's mind spinning with questions. Why was Jonathan risking such a public display if he truly had nothing to hide? On the ride home, Jonathan was silent. Alicia debated whether to confront him. Fear of the truth won out. She remained quiet, letting the hush fill the back seat like a suffocating blanket. One thing was certain: the veneer of their marriage was cracking fast. Weeks after the gala, Alicia woke one morning to a series of text messages from unknown numbers. Each one contained the same cryptic statement: "You deserve better. Check your emails." Shaken, she logged into her personal email account and found an anonymous note with an attachment. The note read, "He's not who you think he is. Trust me, I work with them. This has gone on too long. You should know." Hands trembling, Alicia opened the attachment. Her eyes widened at what she saw. Screenshots of phone call logs, countless late-night messages and photos from Veronica King, all addressed to Jonathan. Some were innocuous, referencing business deals, but others were clearly personal phrases like, "Missing you last night was unforgettable and can't wait until we're alone again," leaped off the screen. A wave of shock crashed over Alicia. She felt like she was floating outside her body, watching herself shatter. She reread the messages, searching for any plausible explanation besides the obvious. Perhaps they were fabricated, or maybe there was some context missing. Yet the depth and frequency of the conversations were undeniable. Jonathan had been carrying on a secret affair with Veronica, and someone inside Cole Capital or close to them had decided to expose it. Through her tears, Alicia tried to remain rational. She recognized some of the timestamps. They aligned perfectly with nights Jonathan claimed to be overseas or tied up in emergency meetings. Worse, there were photos of the two at a private beach, Veronica in a sun hat, Jonathan leaning into her with a tenderness Alicia once believed was reserved only for their marriage. The date stamps matched the weekend he was supposedly in Boston. Alicia doubled over as waves of nausea seized her, uncertain if it was morning sickness or heartbreak. She clutched her phone, tears splashing onto the screen. The anonymous tip had obliterated any chance of maintaining her illusions. Betrayal now stood naked before her, leaving no room for doubt. She scrolled through the messages again, feeling her grief transform into rage. She was pregnant with this man's child, while he gallivanted with another woman behind her back. Was this what their marriage was worth? In desperation, Alicia tried calling Jonathan. No answer. She left a trembling voice message. "We need to talk. Now." Then she buried her face in a pillow, sobbing until exhaustion closed her eyes. The world felt cruel, and she wondered if she had the strength to confront what came next. Jonathan returned home late that evening to find Alicia sitting on the living room couch, the glow of a single lamp illuminating her tear-streaked face. The instant he saw her reddened eyes, he knew something had changed. She said nothing at first, only holding out her phone. He glanced at the screen and visibly paled. Silent seconds stretched as he read through the texts and pictures. Alicia noticed the flicker of guilt crossing his face before he masked it with a forced calmness. "Where did you get these?" he asked, voice low. "Does it matter?" she replied. "They're real, aren't they?" He exhaled shakily, dropping into a seat across from her. "It's complicated. Veronica and I don't want excuses." Alicia's voice trembled with quiet fury. "I want to know how you could do this while I'm pregnant with your child." Jonathan looked away, unable to meet her gaze. "It started as a mistake, Alicia. I was at a conference. We had too much to drink." "That's not an excuse," she snapped. "You lied to me for months." "No years, given these time stamps. You made me doubt my own sanity." He tried to speak, but the words choked in his throat. Instead, tears brimmed in his eyes. Alicia found it almost pitiful. She had once adored this man, who seemed larger than life. Now he looked small, lost, and pathetic, snared in the aftermath of his own betrayal. Eventually, he confessed to an ongoing affair with Veronica. They had grown close while working on high-stakes deals. Their relationship escalated during out-of-town conferences, fueled by adrenaline and the thrill of secrecy. Jonathan insisted it was never about love, but about tension relief and escaping the pressures he faced at Cole Capital. His rationale shattered the last vestiges of Alicia's sympathy. She pointed to her baby bump. "What about me? Your child. Did you ever think about the risk emotionally? Physically?" Jonathan attempted an apology, but the words felt hollow. Alicia erupted pent-up fury, spilling out in a storm of accusations. She recounted every suspicious sign she'd overlooked, how she'd supported his career, how she had endured him missing prenatal appointments. Underneath her anger lay a deep sadness for the life she thought they were building, a life that Jonathan had so casually betrayed. By the time the confrontation ended, Alicia felt emotionally gutted. Jonathan slept in his study that night, if he slept at all. She stared at her bedroom ceiling, tears soaking her pillow, wrestling with how to move forward. The next morning, she awakened to the knowledge that her heartbreak was only beginning, and so was Jonathan's downfall. In the days following Alicia's discovery, Jonathan scrambled to patch up his personal and professional worlds. He promised Veronica he would handle the situation, but that Alicia would always be his priority. He reassured Alicia that he would end the affair immediately, that he would do whatever it took to save their marriage. However, Alicia watched his panic with an air of detachment. Her trust in him was already shattered. Then came the social media explosion. One Monday morning, a popular finance gossip blog, The Street Whisperer, posted a scathing article, "Billionaire Jonathan Cole's Secret Affair, Exposed Exclusive Photos." The piece included leaked pictures of Jonathan and Veronica embracing in what appeared to be a private cabana at a tropical resort. The blog teased additional salacious details forthcoming. Within hours, major business news outlets like Bloomberg and CNBC picked up the story, albeit more cautiously. They framed it as a scandal-rocking Cole Capital Ventures. Stock forums buzzed with speculation about how this might affect Jonathan's leadership and the firm's reputation. On Twitter, finance influencers dissected the ethical implications, with some calling for Jonathan to step down. Jonathan's phone lit up with calls from board members, investors, and perplexed clients. Even Lucy Goldstein, who had once praised him for philanthropic endeavors, publicly condemned his distraction from the greater mission of ethical business. The timing was disastrous. He had been on the cusp of finalizing a massive investment partnership with Tony McAllister. Now everything was in jeopardy. Alicia, reading the news coverage with weary eyes, felt a surge of anger. She had never wanted a public scandal. She would have preferred a private reckoning. But now that the world knew, she felt oddly vindicated. No longer was she alone in suspecting Jonathan's duplicity. Everyone saw it. Even so, she worried about the toll this uproar might exact on her unborn child. Less than 24 hours later, a video surfaced of Jonathan and Veronica walking hand in hand through a hotel lobby in Paris, laughing as though they didn't have a care in the world. The date stamp revealed it was just 2 months prior, around the same time Alicia had told him about her pregnancy. Public outrage soared and investors panicked. Jonathan's carefully curated brand, self-made entrepreneur, philanthropic benefactor, devoted husband, was crumbling under a relentless digital onslaught. In the midst of the uproar, Alicia received a second anonymous email. This time it contained receipts of hush money, transfers from Jonathan's personal account to an offshore entity with references to Veronica's name. The sender wrote, "He's been paying to keep certain things quiet. Thought you should know." Alicia's heart pounded as she examined the evidence. It looked like Jonathan had been funneling funds, possibly to secure Veronica's silence or cooperation. The sum was staggering enough to fund a dozen scholarships or a new arts program in any given school. The revelation further corroded Alicia's hope that Jonathan could ever be the man she once believed him to be. She confronted him the following evening, brandishing printouts of the transactions. "You're bribing her now. Is this blackmail?" "Hush money." "What else have you been hiding?" Jonathan, cornered, admitted. He'd been trying to preempt any public scandal, fearing precisely what was happening now. Veronica wanted compensation for her efforts on certain deals, he claimed. She threatened to go to the competition, or worse, to the media. "I had to protect our company, our name." "Is this your idea of protection?" Alicia spat tears stinging her eyes. "Lying, paying people off, it's disgusting. You betrayed me, betrayed your own ethics if you ever had them." Jonathan's face twisted. "Don't say that. I messed up. But everything I did was to protect us, to keep the family intact." Alicia laughed bitterly, clutching her pregnant belly. "And how's that working out for you? The world knows now. You might lose everything. And me. I don't know if there's any us left to protect." She stormed out, leaving Jonathan staring at the damning documents. On the street, Alicia's mind whirled. She felt trapped, tied by marriage, soon to be tied by parenthood, yet confronted with the ultimate betrayal. The outside world offered no solace, either its eyes fixated on the spectacle of Jonathan's downfall. For a moment she wondered if leaving the city altogether would be the only way to save her sanity. But deep in her heart, Alicia knew she had to stand and face the storm, if not for herself, then for the child growing inside her. Within a week, Jonathan's scandal dominated the business news cycle. Forbes ran an op-ed titled "The Tragic Fall of Finance's Golden Boy," analyzing how personal irresponsibility could sink even the most profitable venture. Share prices for coal, Capital Ventures nosedived, rattling the firm's board of directors and raising alarms among major investors. Social media took an especially brutal stance. Under the hashtag #CoalCollapse, thousands commented on Jonathan's hypocrisy, calling him a poster child for toxic corporate culture. Alicia's name also trended, though more sympathetically. Strangers on the internet expressed solidarity for a pregnant wife betrayed on a global stage. Some urged her to take him for all he's worth, while others championed her as a potential advocate for women wronged by powerful men. Within Coal Capital's walls, tension soared. The workforce split into factions. Some remained loyal to Jonathan, believing the scandal was a personal matter that shouldn't overshadow his accomplishments. Others blamed him for tarnishing the company's name, an act of negligence that jeopardized everyone's jobs. David Lynn tried to calm internal chaos, but rumors circulated that half the board wanted Jonathan removed. Veronica, for her part, took a leave of absence, claiming stress from the public harassment. No one knew if she'd be back. Amid the chaos, Alicia found herself hounded by reporters camped outside the penthouse, cameras and microphones at the ready. She refused to answer questions or open the door, feeling the walls close in on her. Her phone buzzed with calls from tabloids, offering huge sums for an exclusive interview. She declined them all. Journalists even visited her parents' bakery, peppering them with invasive questions. Her mother, Lucia, called Alicia in tears, apologizing for not knowing what to do. Alicia felt a wave of guilt. Her private tragedy had become a public spectacle, and those she loved were collateral damage. Deep inside, a new resolve formed. Alicia realized she had the power to shape her own narrative, rather than let the scandal swirl around her uncontested. She was the wronged party, she had a voice, and if she spoke, the world would listen. Whether that voice would bring healing or further destruction, she didn't yet know. But she was done sitting quietly, while Jonathan's duplicity overshadowed her entire life. During one sleepless night, Alicia stared at old photos on her phone. Her and Jonathan beaming at their wedding, her reading to children at the community center, him unveiling a giant check for a local library. The happy memories contrasted so sharply with the heartbreak she now endured. She felt betrayed not just by Jonathan, but by the entire facade of perfection they once presented. At some point, she scrolled through messages of support from friends, even strangers on social media. People urged her to fight to stand up for herself and her unborn baby. She mulled over the idea of making a public statement, something to reclaim her dignity, but also to call out Jonathan's actions without stooping to sensationalism. Her phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. "I'm sorry for what you're going through. If you need a platform to share your side, we have your back." Signed, Anna Brooks, women's advocate today. Alicia recognized the name Anna Brooks as a well-known journalist and feminist advocate. Anna's open letters had previously brought attention to issues like wage gaps and domestic abuse. The text felt genuine, a rare sign of compassion in a media landscape that often thrived on sensationalism. Alicia's heart pounded. Could she trust Anna to handle her story ethically? The next morning, Alicia called Anna. Their conversation lasted almost an hour. Anna listened without interruption as Alicia spoke of her heartbreak, her isolation, and her fears for her future. She clarified that her aim wasn't to harm Jonathan's career out of spite, but to stand up for her own life and child. Anna offered to arrange a press conference, a controlled environment where Alicia could present her perspective. No tabloid spin, no paparazzi ambush. Alicia agreed, though the decision left her trembling with anticipation and dread. That afternoon, Alicia met with a lawyer who specialized in marital law. She wanted to understand her rights, especially with a baby on the way. While part of her considered divorce, another part still grappled with the love she'd once felt for Jonathan. The lawyer recommended caution, explaining how a public statement might influence settlement negotiations or custody issues. Alicia nodded gravely, fully aware that once she spoke publicly, there would be no going back. In just a few days, Anna Brooks secured a small event space in Midtown, not far from Times Square. The press invite was circulated discreetly among reputable journalists and media outlets. The announcement was simple: Alicia Cole, wife of Jonathan Cole, to make a statement regarding recent events. Despite the short notice, the event attracted major attention. Producers from major networks like CNN, MSNBC, and even BBC reached out eager to broadcast the story of a betrayed wife taking a stand against her millionaire husband. Anna Brooks handled logistics, ensuring Alicia would have privacy to arrive and depart without being mobbed by cameras. In the background, Alicia's lawyer hovered uneasy about how the press conference might affect legal proceedings. Still, Alicia was resolute. This was her narrative to tell. On the eve of the press conference, Alicia worked on her statement in a quiet corner of her parents' bakery, inhaling the comforting scent of fresh bread. Her mother brought her a warm mug of chamomile tea, gently stroking her daughter's hair. "You'll do what's right," Lucia whispered, eyes filled with motherly concern. Alicia's phone buzzed with a text from Jonathan. "Please don't do this. We can fix it privately. Think of our child." She stared at the words, bitterness surging. She typed back, "It's too late for that. You should have thought of our child before you betrayed us." Then she turned off her phone, refocusing on the words she planned to read before the world. Inside her, a swirl of emotions raged: heartbreak, anger, but also an underlying sense of empowerment. She was no longer the supportive wife in the background of Jonathan's success story. She was stepping forward, pregnant and wounded, but ready to claim her truth. Whatever happened next, she promised herself she would be honest, not just for herself, but for all the women who had reached out, telling her to be strong. A brisk wind blew through Manhattan on the morning of Alicia's press conference. Cameras were already set up by the time she arrived, escorted by Anna Brooks. The modest venue could seat about 100 reporters, but more were spilling out the door, forming a crowd on the sidewalk. A hush fell as Alicia stepped onto the small stage, her baby bump subtly outlined beneath a black wrap dress. Anna stood beside her like a protective shield. Flashes lit the room. Alicia took a deep breath, heart pounding so loudly she feared the microphone would pick it up. She glanced at her note cards, then at the sea of expectant faces. She began, voice trembling at first. "Good morning. My name is Alicia Cole, and I'm here to speak about the scandal involving my husband, Jonathan Cole, and his affair with Veronica King. For weeks now, I've watched as this story has been told by tabloids, blogs, and the rumor mill. Today, I want to present the truth from my perspective." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "I have been married to Jonathan for 3 years, and we are expecting a child. I believed in him, stood by him, built a life with him. But I recently discovered, along with the rest of the world, that he was engaged in an extramarital relationship. I have read the same articles, seen the same images. They are devastating, especially given my pregnancy." Cameras clicked incessantly, capturing every flicker of emotion on her face. Alicia continued, her voice growing steadier. "I do not share this to invite pity or to be a pawn in a public spectacle. I share it because women mothers deserve the truth when it comes to the integrity of the men we marry. And because I believe accountability matters, whether you're a private individual or a public figure who touts ethical leadership." She then revealed Jonathan's attempts to cover up the affair, even referencing hush money documents. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Alicia clarified, "I stand here not to destroy Jonathan Cole, but to claim my future and the future of my child free from deception. I believe marriage is a partnership built on trust, and once that trust is broken so thoroughly, we must face the reality of what remains." With tears brimming, Alicia concluded, "I'm asking for privacy and respect as I decide the next steps for my family. I'm grateful for the outpouring of support. My hope is that by speaking my truth, I can begin healing and perhaps encourage others facing similar betrayal to do the same." She stepped back from the podium, a trembling hush sweeping the room. Cameras zoomed in on her tear-streaked face as Anna guided her away. The press conference had lasted less than 10 minutes, but it was enough to ignite a media firestorm that would shake Jonathan Cole's empire to its core. The press conference footage went viral within hours, dominating TV headlines and flooding social media timelines. Clips of Alicia's trembling yet resolute voice played on a loop. Hashtags like #AliciaCole and #Truth4 Women trended globally. Celebrity talk show hosts weighed in praising her bravery. Prominent women's advocacy groups hailed Alicia as a hero for publicly confronting the betrayal. Jonathan Cole, meanwhile, faced an immediate backlash. Investors who had hesitated to sever ties earlier now flocked away from Cole Capital Ventures in droves, unwilling to align themselves with a leader so publicly indicted by his own wife. The firm's stock plummeted further. A joint venture with Tony McAllister was placed on indefinite hold. In a statement to the press, Tony cited concerns about leadership ethics and stability. Inside Cole Capital, the board of directors convened an emergency meeting. The consensus was grim. Jonathan's personal scandal had become a public relations nightmare. A formal vote of no confidence was scheduled for the following week to decide his future at the company he'd built from scratch. Some long-time allies still defended him, claiming that personal issues shouldn't overshadow professional achievements, but they were outnumbered by those pointing to the spiraling finances and brand damage. Jonathan retreated to the penthouse blinds drawn, refusing to comment publicly. Even Veronica King was nowhere to be found, rumored to be on an extended stay in London. For Alicia, the whirlwind of support and media attention felt surreal. Every time she logged online, she saw strangers praising her courage, dissecting her press conference, or labeling Jonathan a monster. She had never wanted to be the face of a movement, but she felt a growing sense of responsibility to use the platform fate had handed her. In private, she grappled with heartbreak and anxiety about the future. She had awakened in a gilded cage, her wealthy lifestyle now overshadowed by betrayal. Yet the press conference had sparked something new, a sense of agency. For the first time since discovering Jonathan's affair, she could breathe freely, certain she was controlling her own path. And that path would soon demand another step, deciding whether to stay in the marriage or proceed with a legal separation. At Cole Capital Ventures, the board of directors convened the crucial vote. The meeting room had never felt so tense. David Lynn sat at one end of the table, his face grim. Over half the chairs were occupied by men and women who once revered Jonathan as a visionary. Now they stared at financial projections, plummeting into the red, accompanied by slideshow images of negative media headlines referencing the Cole scandal. The intangible toll, public distrust, moral outrage, was just as damaging. Jonathan, face pale and eyes rimmed with exhaustion, delivered a desperate plea. He promised to rectify the situation, citing therapy crisis management strategies and a vow to refocus on the firm's core mission. "I've made mistakes," he admitted hoarsely. "But our track record of delivering value can't be overlooked. We are bigger than one scandal. We can still thrive if we stay united." Some board members shifted uncomfortably. A few, including David Lynn, tried to salvage the conversation, arguing for a temporary leave of absence instead of outright dismissal. But the majority believed drastic action was required to restore credibility. A hush blanketed the room as the members cast their anonymous votes. When the tallies were read, the verdict was clear. Jonathan Cole was removed as CEO, effective immediately. Tremors of shock rippled through the halls. Coal Capital employees, once starry-eyed by Jonathan's leadership, watched him clear his office with a mix of pity and muted anger. A caretaker CEO was appointed to stabilize the ship, focusing on damage control. David Lynn glanced at Jonathan with a sorrowful expression as security escorted him out. "I'm sorry, man," David whispered. "I tried to fight for you." Jonathan nodded wordlessly, clutching a box of personal belongings. By evening, business publications around the world proclaimed Coal Capital ousts founder amid scandal. Jonathan's reign was officially over. The man who once soared across the financial stratosphere was now unemployed, disgraced, and teetering on the edge of complete ruin. Jonathan's life unspooled in disarray. With no office to report to, he holed up in the penthouse, ignoring calls from journalists. He occasionally ventured out in sunglasses and a baseball cap, only to be ambushed by paparazzi. Online comments labeled him a cautionary tale of greed and infidelity. Some articles even suggested the affair had been an open secret among New York's finance circles, fueling new levels of scrutiny. Personal finances also took a hit. Jonathan's sudden exit from Coal Capital triggered contractual penalties. He faced possible breach of contract lawsuits tied to deals he'd spearheaded but failed to close. Frozen lines of credit cancelled invitations to VIP events. His social and financial power dwindled. Amid his downward spiral, Jonathan tried repeatedly to contact Alicia, leaving voicemails and handwritten notes. He apologized profusely, claiming he was ready to do anything to salvage their relationship. "I'll go to counseling, sign post-nups. Anything you want. One note. Red." But Alicia remained resolute, focusing instead on her own well-being and that of her unborn child. The final blow came when Alicia's press conference was replayed in a prime-time special with a commentary panel dissecting Jonathan's betrayal. The segment ended with a heartfelt interview of Alicia by Anna Brooks, highlighting Alicia's philanthropic ambitions. Footage showed Alicia visiting an after-school program, receiving cheers from children who recognized her from news coverage. In that moment, the camera panned to Alicia's determined face, capturing her transformation from betrayed spouse to empowered advocate. Jonathan watched the segment alone, a half-finished bottle of scotch by his side. He saw how the public now regarded Alicia with admiration, a stark contrast to his own vilification. In a moment of clarity, he realized he was witnessing the rise of a woman who had once stood quietly beside him, someone he'd taken for granted. Shattered by regret, he continued drinking until the lights of the penthouse blurred into darkness. While Jonathan sank deeper, Alicia was busy forging a new path. Through Anna Brooks's media connections and her own philanthropic background, she organized a fundraiser for underprivileged schools. The event was set to be a smaller, more authentic affair than the high-gloss galas Jonathan once frequented. The proceeds would go toward bridging the digital divide in low-income neighborhoods, an initiative Alicia had championed long before the scandal. As the date approached, Alicia found herself gaining supporters from unexpected places. Tony McAllister, once interested in partnering with Jonathan, reached out privately. He expressed admiration for Alicia's courage and inquired if she'd accept a donation from his philanthropic foundation. She graciously agreed, grateful for the unwavering backing. Others in the business world, previously enthralled by Jonathan, now saw Alicia as an emerging figure with moral authority. Invitations to speak at leadership panels trickled in ironically, offering her the spotlight once promised to her husband. Meanwhile, Alicia took steps to secure her future. Working with a lawyer, she prepared for a potential divorce filing. She also met with a financial advisor, ensuring she understood the complexities of Jonathan's assets and any marital entitlements. Each step felt daunting, yet liberating, as she realized she no longer had to abide by the illusions of a perfect marriage. In a surprising twist, David Lynn approached Alicia discreetly. He apologized on behalf of Cole Capital, acknowledging that many within the firm admired her. "We know Jonathan's downfall was his own doing," David admitted. "We'd like to work with you in some capacity, maybe an advisory role on the philanthropic side." Alicia hesitated, uncertain about maintaining ties to an institution so entangled with Jonathan's betrayal. Still, she considered the possibility of effecting positive change from within. Days turned into weeks as Alicia balanced philanthropic planning, potential legal battles, and the emotional toll of pregnancy. Through it all, she maintained her composure, fueled by a sense of purpose. While part of her still grieved the betrayal, she also recognized a budding strength. Her identity was no longer solely Mrs. Jonathan Cole. She was Alicia Cole, a force in her own right. One brisk afternoon, as Alicia returned to her parents' bakery for a quiet meeting with donors, she found Jonathan waiting near the doorway, slumped against a lamppost. He appeared disheveled, unshaven eyes bloodshot, wearing a crumpled blazer. The sight startled her, stirring both pity and residual anger. "Please," he said, voice strained. "Just a moment of your time." She considered walking past him, but compassion nudged her to pause. She let him follow her inside, where they settled at a back table amid the comforting aroma of fresh pastries. Lucia glanced over worriedly from the counter, but respected her daughter's privacy. Jonathan exhaled shakily. "I've lost everything, my job, my reputation. I can't lose you too. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm begging you to give me another chance." Alicia felt tears prick her eyes, though she kept her composure. "Another chance to do what? You've lied to me, cheated on me, humiliated me publicly." He pressed a trembling hand to his forehead. "I know. I was an idiot. I was greedy, arrogant. The money, the power, it consumed me. Veronica was just a symptom of my own weaknesses." "That doesn't erase what you did," Alicia murmured. "It doesn't take back the night you were with her, while I lay at home, excited to share baby news with you. It doesn't undo all the heartbreak." Jonathan lowered his head, tears slipping down his cheeks. Alicia recognized genuine remorse in his eyes, but she also knew it might be too late. "If you need me to sign anything," he whispered, "custody agreements, child support, I'll do it. I just want to be part of the baby's life." The request struck a chord deep within Alicia. Their child deserved a father, but was Jonathan capable of the responsibility? She wrestled with conflicting emotions, the memory of happier times, and the fresh sting of betrayal. Finally, she said, "I can't make that decision right now. I need time. But this much is clear. You have to deal with the consequences of what you've done on your own." Jonathan nodded, head bowed in defeat. Before leaving, he offered a small envelope. "In case you want to reach me. That's my new number." Then he slipped out into the cold afternoon, a broken man, still clinging to a shred of hope. In the following weeks, Alicia immersed herself in planning her fundraiser, channeling her emotions into a cause that symbolized new beginnings. The event space was modest, a converted art gallery in Brooklyn, yet the atmosphere radiated warmth. Donors included local business owners, educators, and some philanthropic heavyweights. Alicia opened the evening by sharing her own story, not focusing on the scandal, but on the importance of forging a brighter future for the next generation. The fundraiser turned into a soaring success, raising more funds than Alicia had anticipated. Attendees praised her vision, and media coverage highlighted her commitment to positive change, contrasting starkly with Jonathan's tarnished reputation. Standing at the podium, Alicia felt a rush of empowerment. As she thanked the crowd, her hand drifted to her baby bump. She realized that in building a better world for others, she was also building a better world for her child. Not long after Alicia filed for legal separation, citing irreconcilable differences. The move was symbolic as much as legal, a declaration that she was no longer tethered to Jonathan's fate. Public interest in the scandal waned, replaced by fresh headlines as the news cycle moved on. Life was still challenging, but Alicia awoke each morning with a renewed sense of purpose, surrounded by supportive friends and family. As for Jonathan, rumors suggested he had entered therapy and was considering launching a smaller financial consultancy if he could find backers. Some whispered that he was volunteering at a youth center, seeking to rediscover the philanthropic spark that once defined him. Whether these rumors were genuine or just strategic, Alicia didn't know. Occasionally she thought about letting him be involved with the child, but she needed reassurance that he had truly changed. Alicia's belly grew, and so did her resolve. She had discovered her voice in the midst of betrayal, learning that her worth wasn't measured by a man's success or the illusions they spun together. The conclusion of this saga was not a bitter end, but rather the blossoming of her independence. She carried with her the lessons of heartbreak, the joy of impending motherhood, and a determination to rise above any scandal that dared to overshadow her future. The downfall of Jonathan Cole and the rise of Alicia Cole stand as a testament to life's unpredictable turns. A single leak online dragged a powerhouse billionaire into ruin, yet it also became a spark for his pregnant wife to find her voice, her mission, and her freedom. Betrayal can devastate, but it can also illuminate truths we've long buried. Alicia transformed her heartbreak into a crusade for better opportunities, showing that even in the darkest moments, we have the power to rebuild and sometimes shine brighter than ever before. If this story moved, you don't let it end here. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life drama and compelling narratives. Your support helps us continue bringing stories of resilience, empowerment, and the triumph of the human spirit. Stay tuned for our next riveting tale, because when one door closes, another door swings open, often revealing a whole new world of possibilities. Meanwhile, Alicia Cole, his pregnant wife, began to sense the cracks in her gilded cage. No one, least of all Jonathan, suspected how quickly a single online leak would unravel his carefully manicured world, ending his career in the span of one unforgettable night. Jonathan Cole's story was the stuff of modern legend. Born to middle-class parents in suburban New Jersey, he had clawed his way to a scholarship at Harvard Business School. There he'd rubbed shoulders with future magnates, forging alliances that would later propel him to the top of the finance world. By age 32, Jonathan had founded Cole Capital Ventures, a private equity firm that specialized in distressed real estate assets, buying low, selling high, and weaving magic in between. His good looks and suave charm made him a darling of the business press. Forbes ran a feature titled Young Titan. Jonathan Cole's meteoric rise, capturing him in a tailored navy suit against the panoramic backdrop of New York City. In the interview, he praised mentors such as Warren Buffett for teaching him patience and Bill Gates for demonstrating philanthropy on a global scale. The crowning moment, though, was his picture-shaking hands with Elon Musk after a speculative investment in aerospace startups. Jonathan glowed with the certainty that he was destined for greatness. It was at a fundraiser in Central Park that he first met Alicia Martinez. She was a non-profit consultant with a passion for arts education. Where Jonathan's approach to conversation was slick and polished, Alicia's was empathetic and earnest. He found her refusal to be dazzled by his reputation oddly refreshing. She was there to talk about underfunded public schools, not hedge funds or leveraged buyouts. By the end of that charity walk, Jonathan had her phone number, and she had a curious spark in her heart. In 2 short years, they were married. Alicia's parents, humble owners of a small bakery in Queens, couldn't believe their daughter was wedding a man so frequently mentioned in the Wall Street Journal. But to Alicia, Jonathan wasn't simply the millionaire. He was the person who showed up unannounced to volunteer at her community events, who wrote personal checks for after-school programs. Their wedding ceremony, held at a historic mansion overlooking the Hudson River, was a glamorous yet heartfelt affair. The tabloids brimmed with gushing coverage, Alicia radiant in lace, Jonathan dashing in a classic tuxedo, smiling as though they had discovered the secret to eternal happiness. At first, their union genuinely seemed magical. Jonathan declared that Alicia grounded him, tethered him to values he might have otherwise forgotten. She brought soul to his ambition. Life in the Cole penthouse sparkled with promise, lavish soirees for global dignitaries, altruistic ventures to build schools in underprivileged neighborhoods, and daily bursts of joy that only 2 people deeply in love could share. If only that bliss could have lasted. Life moved quickly in Jonathan's orbit. The success of Cole Capital Ventures brought new deals, new acquaintances, and inevitably new pressures. Over time, Alicia witnessed the subtle changes in her husband's routine. Invitations from the global elite poured in exclusive dinners with real estate mogul Mark Anderson, lunches at the Plaza with famed venture capitalist Lucy Goldstein, and hush-hush strategy sessions with foreign sovereign funds. While Alicia supported her husband's drive, she couldn't ignore the increasing cracks in his calendar or in his demeanor. He began coming home later, offering vague explanations about urgent meetings or unexpected negotiations. Alicia, ever understanding, reassured him that she respected his hustle. But then came the cancellations of their personal plans. A date to watch an off-Broadway show cancelled. A weekend getaway to the Hamptons postponed. Birthdays and family gatherings became second-tier priorities. The more she tried to reach him, the more she felt a certain emotional distance creeping in. Around the office, Jonathan was surrounded by loyalists and ladder climbers alike. One of them was David Lynn, his longtime friend from Harvard, and now partner at Cole Capital. David had witnessed Jonathan's evolution firsthand. He noticed subtle changes too: Jonathan's sharper edge during conference calls, the tension behind his charismatic smile during business pitches. Yet David trusted that a man as resourceful as Jonathan always had it under control. Among the staff at Cole Capital Ventures was also the bright and ambitious Veronica King. A recent Wharton MBA graduate, Veronica had made waves by closing a multi-million-dollar investment in green technology within her first year at the firm. Her intelligence and striking beauty made her a conversation piece at every corporate event. Jonathan lauded her as the future face of finance, praising her for deals that posted triple returns. He found in Veronica a reflection of his younger self, hungry, driven, and fearless. Still, none suspected that an alliance far different than business was about to form. At this point, Alicia had no idea who Veronica King truly was. She saw her name in passing on annual reports. Occasionally, Jonathan would mention Veronica's accomplishments, praising her for innovative thinking. Alicia would nod and smile, impressed by this rising star. In Alicia's mind, she was grateful Jonathan had formidable professionals like Veronica on his team. She never once suspected that the very power he admired in his protégé might be forging a dangerous temptation beneath their polished corporate veneer. As Alicia's pregnancy crept into her second trimester, she began noticing odd details. The first warning sign was a perfume scent she didn't recognize lingering on Jonathan's coat. She asked him about it casually, and he brushed it off, probably from a handshake at some networking event. Another red flag was how he protected his phone like a prized artifact, always face down, always locked with a new passcode. Late at night, she'd hear the faint buzz of messages, see the subtle glow of his screen as he typed back in the dark. Each time she tried to rationalize away her concerns. This was the man she loved, who donated millions to build libraries in underserved communities, who cried at the birth announcement, who once surprised her on a random Tuesday with her favorite pastries from her parents' bakery. Infidelity seemed unimaginable. Yet Alicia's heart churned with a subtle, gnawing dread. Life in the Cole penthouse had become increasingly solitary. Although Jonathan had promised to limit business travel during her pregnancy, his schedule remained as frenetic as ever. Singapore, Dubai, Paris. He was always on the go, chasing new mergers or expansions. He rarely spent more than a couple of nights at home. When he did, he was restless, glued to emails or brainstorming calls. Alicia began to feel that the only presence she could truly count on was the baby she carried. Friends from Alicia's old neighborhood in Queens reached out with concern. They missed her visits the way she used to pop in for coffee and conversation. He's just going through a busy phase, she'd reassure them. In a way, Alicia was trying to reassure herself too. Still, doubt grew every time she caught sight of that mysterious perfume, or saw a new bruise-like shadow under her husband's eyes from sleepless nights. Then Alicia found something chilling, a hotel receipt tucked in Jonathan's suitcase from a high-end resort in Turks and Caicos. The date overlapped with a weekend he'd told her he was in Boston, closing a deal. She tried to confront him, but lost her nerve. Could she have misunderstood? Was it a courtesy booking for a client or staff? Her mind ran in circles, seeking a plausible explanation. Little did she know the truth was far more insidious. Veronica King was not the sort of woman who blended into the background. With ebony hair styled in a sleek bob, she carried herself with confident ease. By day, she dazzled boardrooms with crisp financial analyses, commanding respect from colleagues twice her age. By night, she appeared in social columns alongside Manhattan's elite, her emerald dress shimmering under paparazzi flashes. She was rumored to have grown up in modest circumstances, determined to break ceilings, no matter the cost. One evening, Alicia found herself accompanying Jonathan to a charity gala, hosted by the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Proceeds would benefit underfunded art programs in public schools, an event that aligned perfectly with Alicia's passion. Upon arriving, Alicia felt the old sparkle of excitement hobnobbing with notable figures like gallery owners, educators, and philanthropic entrepreneurs. A group of Jonathan's colleagues from Cole Capital Ventures greeted them, among whom was Veronica. This was their first real introduction. "Ah, the legend herself," Veronica said, with a radiant smile, extending her hand to Alicia. "Jonathan speaks so highly of you, and all the wonderful work you do with school kids." Alicia returned the greeting, struck by Veronica's grace. She was everything Alicia imagined a high-flying finance star, to be polished, assertive, exuding an air of subtle power. When Alicia mentioned her involvement in drafting new arts curricula, Veronica listened attentively, nodding as though she truly cared. The conversation was pleasant, even warm. Yet Alicia caught a flicker of something unspoken between Veronica and Jonathan, a shared glance that felt too intimate, too layered with private meaning. Throughout the gala, Alicia couldn't shake the sense that eyes were on them, as if the rest of the guests sensed an undercurrent. She told herself she was imagining it, that she was just hormonal and overthinking, but a tiny voice inside her whispered, "Veronica King is more important to Jonathan than you realize." By the evening's end, Alicia felt unsettled. Jonathan excused himself to take a call, just when Alicia was beginning to share her feelings about an educational campaign. Veronica also vanished into the throng of socialites. Alicia sipped her sparkling water in awkward solitude, noticing a faint swirl of that same unfamiliar perfume drifting through the air. After the gala, Alicia began piecing together subtle patterns. Jonathan had singled Veronica out in so many conversations, praising her as a strategic genius, marveling at her ability to close deals in weeks that took others months. In the past, Alicia had been proud whenever Jonathan mentored bright up-and-comers. Yet with Veronica, the tone of his praise sounded tinged with personal adoration. One morning, Alicia found herself with a free schedule and decided to surprise Jonathan at his office with homemade pastries, his favorite almond croissants from her parents' bakery. It was a gesture she used to do often, back when everything felt normal. Arriving unannounced, Alicia was greeted by the wide-eyed receptionist, who stumbled through a hello, as though not entirely sure how to handle her presence. She brushed it off and headed down the glass-walled corridor to Jonathan's corner office. Outside his door, Alicia froze. Through the partial opening, she heard lowered voices. Jonathan and Veronica seemed to be in the middle of a heated discussion, but not in an angry sense, more like an emotionally charged conversation. Alicia didn't want to eavesdrop, yet she couldn't will herself to move. Then she clearly heard Veronica say, "We'll figure this out, Jonathan. I'm not giving up on you." A brief silence followed, and then Jonathan's voice, softer. "I know. Just not here." Alicia's heart hammered in her chest. She quickly retraced her steps and waited by the reception area, forcing a casual expression when Veronica exited the office moments later. Veronica paused in surprise upon seeing Alicia with the pastry box. "Oh, hi. I didn't know you'd be stopping by." Her voice carried an undercurrent of tension, though her face remained impeccably calm. Alicia's fingers clenched around the box as she managed a tight smile. Their brief exchange ended with Veronica slipping away in a swirl of designer perfume. Alicia approached Jonathan's office next. He greeted her with mild surprise and a forced grin. "Almond croissants, wow," he said, accepting the box. His eyes flicked to the door as if confirming Veronica was gone. Alicia asked if he was all right, and Jonathan dismissed it as office stress. The entire moment felt like a carefully choreographed dance, with unspoken tensions swirling around them. That night, Alicia hardly slept, twisting the memory of Veronica's words over and over in her mind. "I'm not giving up on you." She remembered how intimate they sounded, like a promise between lovers rather than colleagues. Uncertainty blossomed, overshadowing even the joys of her pregnancy. She told herself she needed proof before leaping to conclusions that might destroy her marriage. Still, the seeds of suspicion had taken root, and the soil of her heart felt unbearably cold. Despite mounting worries, Alicia maintained her public smile as she accompanied Jonathan to another high-profile event, the annual City of Tomorrow Gala. Headlined by luminaries in real estate, tech, and philanthropy, It was a can't-miss affair for anyone jockeying for influence. Jonathan was especially eager to network with Tony McAllister, a legendary investor rumored to be launching a multi-billion-dollar fund. Alicia planned to share her vision for an educational project that integrated cutting-edge technology into underfunded schools, hoping to drum up philanthropic support. The venue was lavish, a 5-star hotel ballroom overlooking Central Park. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and violin music mingled with the hum of high-stakes conversation. Alicia wore a flowing cobalt gown, tailored to accommodate her growing baby bump. She felt both regal and uneasy, noting the stares from various acquaintances. She wondered if she was imagining the undertones of gossip in their voices when they greeted her. About an hour into the gala, Veronica King swept in, wearing a sequined emerald dress that seemed to catch every flicker of light. She joined Jonathan, who stood near a champagne fountain, exchanging pleasantries with Tony McAllister. Veronica's arrival sparked a shift in the air. Jonathan's posture straightened, and there was a palpable current of electricity as they spoke. Alicia approached, heart thudding. She joined the circle just in time to hear Jonathan praising Veronica. She single-handedly brought in an Indonesian sovereign fund for our latest project. Imagine what she'll do next year. Veronica laughed softly, thanking him, while shooting a quick, coded look in his direction. That fleeting glance felt like a secret confession. Tony McAllister then turned to Alicia, politely inquiring about her philanthropic interests. Seizing the opportunity, she shared her concept for bridging education gaps through advanced technology.